So with an increase in government spending, the ISK will shift to the right. That will cause both interest rate and output to increase. And then a decrease in spending is just like an increase in tax. So ISK will shift to the left. There's no shift in the LM curve. Both interest rate and then output will fall. And then for an increase in money supply, it doesn't affect the IS curve, it affects the LM curve. It causes it to shift downwards. And when it shifts downwards, there's going to be an increase in the output level and a reduction in interest rate. Okay, remember, interest rates must fall for investment to increase to cause the increase in the output level. Okay, then for a decrease in money supply, that one too won't affect the IS curve. It affects LM. It will shift upwards. So there's going to be an increase in the interest rate. That will cause a reduction in investment. So output will fall. Okay, that will cause a fall. So this is just a summary of how the changes in those variables affect output and then interest rates. At times, they don't embark on just one policy. They can mix them up, the fiscal and then monetary at the same time. So whatever they do, it depends on what they want, how they want output to change, okay, how they want the output level to change. That is what will cause them to either mix them up. If they feel like just one wouldn't be able to achieve the goal, then they have to mix them up. Okay, so we are looking at the relative effectiveness of monetary policy and then fiscal policy. If we want to increase output level, which one should we go for? Is it monetary? Is it fiscal? Which one we go for depends on the slope of the IS and then the LM curves. Okay, and I'm sure you remember what determines the slopes of these curves. Okay, let me just remind you. For IS curve, it depends on the interest elasticity of investment. It depends on the interest elasticity of investment. If investment is interest inelastic, it makes the IS curve steep. Okay, it makes it steep. And when it's steep, fiscal policy is good. Why is it so? When investment is interest inelastic, it reduces the crowding out because investment doesn't really depend on, it doesn't really respond to interest rates. So even after the increase in government spending, there will be an increase in interest rate, but the fall in investment to be very small because investment doesn't really respond to changes in interest rate. But in the case where investment is interest sensitive or interest elastic, it will make the IS curve flatter. And that means that whenever government increases its spending, a small increase in interest rates will cause a very large fall in investment, which means that the fall in Y will be very large. And that talks about a larger crowding out, of which we don't want. We want output to increase. Okay, so investment is not supposed to be too sensitive to interest rates. So whenever the IS curve is steep, then it's better you go for a fiscal policy. Okay, and then talking about the LM curve too, the steepness depends on interest elasticity of money demand. If money demand is interest inelastic, it means that it doesn't really depend on interest rate. Okay, it doesn't really depend on interest rate. That is going to make the LM curve steeper. Okay, and at that point, monetary policy will be more effective. This is a reason. If money demand is not interest sensitive, in other words, it's interest inelastic. When you increase money supply, we know that money demand must increase to ensure equilibrium. But because money demand doesn't really respond to changes in the interest rate must fall by a larger margin. You see that people don't really change their demand for money based on the changes in the level of interest rate. They don't really respond to changes in interest rate. So before they can recognize that there's a fall in interest rate, so we really need to hold more money, then the interest rate must be very low. You really need to reduce the interest rate before they can hold more money to ensure that there's an equilibrium after an increase in income and an increase in money supply. So because the interest rate must fall much, as it is still falling, investment will keep on what? Increasing. And as investment is increasing, there's an increase, there's a larger increase in income, and that will make the monetary policy more effective. As I said earlier, monetary policy is only working through interest rates, through investment before they get to the income level. Okay, so if money demand is interest inelastic, it makes the LM curve steep, and that means that whenever you increase money supply, interest rate must fall. It must really fall. And as interest rate is falling, it is causing a larger increase in investment, which will cause a larger increase in income, making the monetary policy more effective. On the other hand, when money demand is interest elastic or interest sensitive, it means that after you increase your money supply, interest rates will only fall by a small margin for the money demand to increase to the point that is required. People are very sensitive to the changes in interest rate regarding the amount of money that they hold. So if there is an increase in money supply, as soon as you reduce the interest rate by a small margin, the money demand will fall to the point that you are looking for, which means that the increase in investment will be very small because the reduction in interest rate is small, which will cause a small change in income. So the monetary policy won't be very effective. So whenever money demand is interest elastic, it makes the LM curve flatter, and that doesn't support monetary policy at all. So when they are deciding which policy they need to go for in order to increase the income level, you need to consider how steep IS is, how steep LM is. When IS is steep, go for fiscal policy. When LM is steep, you go for monetary policy. So let's look at the diagrams that we have here. Okay, we want to look at how the steepness of the IS curve can control how effective the fiscal policy will be. Now let's look at a flatter IS curve. So this is the initial equilibrium. Okay, initial equilibrium. So income is Y star. Now, if we increase government spending, the IS curve will shift to IS1. Okay, so now this is the new equilibrium. But see, if interest rates didn't increase from this level to this level, this would have been the level of income. But because of the increase in interest rates, moving from Y to Y prime star is the crowding out. You see how big the crowding out is. So when the IS curve is flat, which means that investment is more interest sensitive, it makes the crowding out so large, and that reduces the effectiveness of the fiscal policy. You see that as a result, the change in Y will be very small, okay, because the crowding out is too large, it's too big. But if you look at a steeper IS curve, this is the initial equilibrium, okay, with equilibrium Y at Y star. If we embark on this fiscal policy, the IS curve will shift to IS prime, okay? So this is the new equilibrium. But if interest rates was to be the same at the same point before the increase in government spending, this would have been the level of income. So moving from here to here is the crowding out. You see how smaller this crowding out is. You see, so if you compare the two, this one, the latter fall in Y is too large. But for this one, the latter fall in Y is very small. That's why we are saying that when the IS curve is steep, it's better you go for fiscal policy. When it's flat, no, fiscal policy won't be effective because the crowding out will be too large. Please, do you understand? Anna,